It was meant as a joke between a sister and brother as she proudly showed him round her new £1.2 million home and the gardens outside. As they passed the garage block, successful children's author Helen Bailey pointed out the cesspit inside and joked with her brother John that it was a good place to hide a body. With them that summer's day in 2013 was the man Helen was planning to marry, Ian Stewart. Moments later, Helen, her brother and Stewart posed for photos in the garden, but her remark that day may well have sealed her fate. During the trial, the jury heard the prosecution claim that predator Stewart had targeted the writer soon after meeting her, when she was in a vulnerable state, having recently lost her first husband in a tragic drowning accident. Having discovered that Helen Bailey was a wealthy widow worth in the region of £4 million, Stewart set about playing the long game, determined to get his hands on her fortune. They got secretly engaged and moved in together at Hartwell Lodge in Baldock Road, Royston in 2013, with Helen coming up with most of the money to buy it. By 2014, Stewart had moved from being a witness to Helen's will to its main beneficiary. It was July of last year, and by then Helen, 51, who had written the Electra Brown and Daisy Davenport books for teenagers, was the focus of a massive police hunt after her partner, 56-year-old Stewart, had reported her missing 3 months earlier in April of 2016.
Hertfordshire Police, how can I help?
Hello there. My partner has been missing since Monday and not contacted anyone. Said she was going away, hasn't ended up where she said she was going. So we just decided we should report it.
Oh, okay, it hasn't been reported already?
No, it hasn't, no.
Okay, right. Has she been missing since Monday?
Yeah.
What's your partner's name?
Helen Bailey.
Helen Bailey. Is that B-A-Y-L-E-Y?
No, B-A-I-L-E-Y.
And what's her date of birth?
Oh, crikey. God, she phoned me there. 22nd. Right, just let me double check. 1 second. Oh, God.
Ian Stewart decided to kill Helen Bailey during the middle of the day on Monday, April the 11th last year because he feared his murder plot was about to be exposed. For weeks, he'd been secretly plying Helen with quantities of a sleeping drug called Zopiclone. The drug had been prescribed to him in January 2016 by his GP for insomnia, but he'd never taken it. Instead, he was administering it in increasing amounts to an unsuspecting Helen by slipping it into her food, probably the scrambled eggs he regularly cooked her for breakfast. Helen had started to notice that she was unusually tired, she was forgetful and sometimes felt disorientated. On one occasion, she'd spoken of not recognising her own hands. Stewart knew he had to act quickly because Helen was becoming concerned about the tiredness she was experiencing. He knew it would only be a matter of time before Helen went to her GP with her concerns and no doubt be given a blood test which would reveal the telltale presence of Zopiclone in her system. Police think Helen was murdered at Hartwell Lodge sometime between late morning of April 11th and the early afternoon. Helen was a prolific user of computers and laptops. That Monday morning, she was again busy sending and receiving emails and texts, but suddenly, just before 11 a.m, all activity stopped. It's thought she was killed soon afterwards by Stewart, who smothered her, probably as she became drowsy from the Zopiclone, and then dragged her body on a duvet out to the garage block where he dropped it down a shaft and into the cesspit. During the early afternoon of that day, the defendant had set about trying to alter a standing order that was already in place, paying £600 a month from Helen's Barclays account into a Santander account in both their names. Using his own computer, he created a new standing order for a new figure of £4,000 a month to come out of Helen's accounts and into the Santander account he would have access to. Ian Stewart was arrested by the police following the discovery of Helen's body and refused to answer any questions put to him by the police.
Morning, Ian. How are you? I'm Detective Sergeant Dave Sharp from the Major Crime Team. Okay, I've got a warrant to search the address. Section 8, what I call Section 8 page warrant. Do you just want to listen to what the question's got to say?
I'm just going to explain to you, Mr. Stewart, okay? I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Helen Bailey.
You're joking?
And of disposing her body in a manner to likely to instruct the coroner, and of theft of money of Helen Bailey. Okay, so you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do mention the question. Finally, you may to rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand that?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, alright, do you want to sit down?
Bloody hell, why? Okay, well, we're going to speak to you at the police station, right? So what needs to happen, you need to probably get some clothes on, okay, and then you need to go to the police station, and these officers will transport you to the police station, and then you'll have a charge of being interviewed at the police station, okay?
You're the last person to see her alive. You wait 4 days to report her missing. You're vague about your movements on the 11th, at best. Vague. You take a duvet to the tip on the 11th. You don't report her missing for 4 days. The following day you go to Broadstairs. I don't know why. Why did you go there? Did you see Helen on the 16th? Because according to the technical information we've got, her phone is in Broadstairs. And you're in Broadstairs. Was Helen there? She wasn't, was she? Or was she? You tell me. Did you kill Helen Bailey? Did you intend to kill her? Or was this an accident? What happened? Did you just lose control, just lose it? Some big argument and you killed her. And you've been covering up ever since. Because if that's what's happened, you need to tell us now. Because this could be your last opportunity to speak to the police about this. You are here on suspicion of murder. You need to tell us what happened. There is transactions where it clearly shows, from what I've seen, that you have taken money, or someone has taken money, which I believe to be you, from her account into your joint account, which you have obviously access to. Therefore, you've now got access to an extra £12,000. You will have benefited from her death, is that correct? Why do you say that? Financially, you will have benefited from her death, would you not say? Did anyone force you to carry out the murder?
He was charged with her murder and remanded in Bedford prison to await his trial.
The fiancé of children's author Helen Bailey has been convicted of her murder. The 51-year-old went missing in April last year. Her body was found 3 months later in a septic tank at her home. Well, Sky's Sarah Hadjibagheri is at the court in St Albans, and so you've been following the case. What can you tell us?
Well, this has been a 7-week trial, but it took the jury just 1 day to find Ian Stewart guilty of murdering his fiancée, Helen Bailey. Now, she had been planning her upcoming wedding to him whilst he was planning her death. She was an incredibly successful author. She'd written 23 books and made her name in children's fiction, but her last book detailed her personal experience of losing her first husband, and in that book she talks about meeting this gorgeous grey-haired widower. That man was Ian Stewart, and having covered this case for several weeks now and speaking to her friends, it's very clear that she was absolutely besotted with him. She was engaged to be married with him and excited about being so. Now, she was worth £4 million, and she had made financial arrangements that in the event of her death, that money would go to him. And in the months leading up to her death, he had been drugging her for a period of time until on April 11th last year, he suffocated her and then dumped her body in the cesspit underneath the garage at their home in Royston in Hertfordshire. Now, throughout this trial, he has always denied those charges, and he said he came up with a very elaborate excuse. An excuse that was described as absolutely absurd in court, and that was that that Helen Bailey had been kidnapped and that he had been framed for murder. Now, earlier we heard from the senior investigator about this case.
Diane Stewart died of natural causes in 2010. It would only be right and proper that we re-looked at what the causes might be. But she did die 7 years ago. There is no suggestion that she died of anything other than natural causes, but of course it would be part of our inquiries moving forward from this conviction.
So Ian Stewart has been found guilty of murdering his fiancée, Helen Bailey, and now we learn that police will be re-examining the death of his first wife, Diane Stewart, who died in 2010. I can now also share with you some of the compelling video evidence that the jury saw over a period of 7 weeks in this trial. Here's my report.
You know, life is good again. I never thought I'd say it. I never believed it, but it's good again.
Just 6 months after this interview promoting her latest book about becoming a widow, Helen Bailey was murdered. She'd thought she'd found love again, but while she was planning her upcoming wedding to fiancé Ian Stewart, he was planning her death. A close friend said Helen was besotted with him.
He was on a widow and widowers website. He'd lost his wife, and Helen was very excited to meet someone. He's spoken about or written about very much in her book.
She'd seemed happy in the relationship was in a good place.
There was nothing that alerted me.
His motive was financial.
Hi everybody, it's Helen. I'm a writer.
Her career as a best-selling author of 23 books had amassed her a £4 million fortune, which was to be left to him should she die.
Did you suspect before he was arrested that he could be in any way involved?
Someone really close to me said, you know, it's always the partner. And I know Helen's sense of judgment, and I was very, very closely involved. Said, well, you know, I can't imagine in this case.
But Ian had been drugging his fiancée with sleeping pills prescribed to him for months before smothering her in a calculated killing on the 11th of April 2016. That afternoon, he transferred thousands of pounds from her account into one he had access to, before CCTV captured him dumping bedding involved in the murder and then picking up a takeaway. 4 days later, he finally rang the police to record Helen missing.
Hertfordshire Police, how can I help?
In an erratic phone call where he referred to her in the past tense and couldn't answer the most basic of questions.
And what's her date of birth?
Oh, crikey. God, you phoned me there.
Her eye colour?
I don't know at the moment. Sorry, it's just gone out of my head. Sorry, God, that's terrible.
Before trotting out his cover story.
She left a note. She said in the note something like, I need space and time alone.
And then this lie.
She's definitely not at home, no.
No, my brother asked that. I've literally checked everywhere. We have got quite a large house, but I have literally checked everywhere.
During the 3-month search for Helen, Ian was uncooperative, sometimes obstructive.
So you're telling us you're hungry. We ideally probably would like to do another interview with you.
Another one?
As he watched police conduct what he knew to be a futile missing person investigation. He continued to text her phone and, despite his apparent grief, went on holiday before being arrested on suspicion of murder last July.
Are you joking?
On caution, he let slip where he dumped Helen.
It's not like the garage door's open.
At the back of the home they shared is a garage. Hidden beneath a car was a hatch to a cesspit, where police eventually found Helen's body. She'd been discarded to decompose in human excrement, and alongside her, her dog Boris, that never left her side.
Did you kill Helen Bailey?
Ian Stewart refused to answer police questions before claiming Helen was killed by kidnappers who framed him. But his lies unravelled in court.
You had the money, you had the planning, you had the use of the sedative, and then you had this extraordinary cover-up, which went on for several months, and then this fantastical story that he produced, that the crime had been committed by these shadowy figures called Nick and Joe.
Ian Stewart planned the murder of a woman who loved him. For those that loved her, that's the ultimate heartache.
What were the hardest things that came out from the trial?
How she'd been found. And that she'd been with someone she loved, and that this had happened for her money.
You go there first, okay?
Helen Bailey's last actions on the morning that she was murdered was to email a wedding venue. She was absolutely besotted with Ian Stewart, the man who killed her. She trusted him deeply, and he betrayed her in the most horrendous way imaginable. When he heard the sentence, that he'd been found guilty in court, simply shook his head. He'll be sentenced tomorrow at 10 in the morning.